going on, guys? This is going to be a little bit of an unscripted video. I'm just going to talk basically about Kong Skull Island, what I thought about it, kind of just like a general review, and how I felt about it in general. First off, it's more of a kind of like a fun action movie. It doesn't take itself too seriously, which is pretty apparent with the addition of comedic roles and things like that. It's not it's not anything like Godzilla 2014 was, and I like that. Um, Clearly, the main difference is that Kong is actually in the movie, unlike Godzilla 2014, where Godzilla wasn't in the movie really. He was more of a cameo role in his own movie, which was a little upsetting. Um, and it wasn't always person perspective of the monsters. It was a floating camera on a monster so you can actually see what's happening, which is the way it should be. I get that the whole person field of view is unique and it's how it would actually be if you were there, but we're gonna go see a monster movie to see monsters. We should probably see the monsters. So, there's that right off the bat. Um, Obviously, I mean, the movie just starts out with Monarch trying to get away to get funded to go to Skull Island. Um, and the only way they can do this is by piggybacking their operation off of a geological survey that's going on. And then they request a military escort, and that's where the helicopters things come from. Is Colonel Packard, Samuel L. Jackson, is the one of the last helicopter brigades left from Vietnam, and they were supposed to be sent home the day that this is happening, but they get sent on this one last mission. Obviously, not a good idea, but Samuel L. Jackson's kind of like needs war. It's like his character. He is a aggressive general, so he accepts the mission because he doesn't want to go home. So that's how those three groups get pulled together. And obviously you have a photographer and a tracker as well, and they just end up going. They fly in the helicopters. They go on a ship to the island, or near the island where the storm system is around, and the geological survey group doesn't want to go because they think it's too dangerous, but they go anyways because Colonel Packard is sweet ass helicopter pilot, bro, so they can get him in no problem. So they get in just fine, and they're just kind of surveying the island, and then the first thing they run into is Kong. So Kong takes down every single helicopter, and they all get split up, and the only way that they can get off the island is a refueling mission that's going to be in 3 days on the north end of the island, and they're on the south end basically. So from this point on, the entire movie is just the groups trying to regroup with each other, and the group of the main characters, which would be like everyone that isn't like in Samuel L. Jackson's basically platoon, is just trying to get to the north end of the island to survive, where Colonel Packard is trying to rally the rest of his forces and get to one of the helicopters with some artillery left on it to get revenge against Kong. Doesn't really care about getting off the island. His main objective is just to kill Kong, where everyone just wants to leave, but his men has to follow his orders. And he uses the one man that they don't have accounted for as like the way to make his way along the island. Is like, oh, we can't leave him behind, when in reality it's all about killing Kong. And then that guy ends up getting killed by a skull crawler anyways. And through this traveling from one group to the north end of the island, that's where you kind of get a glimpse of seeing the other creatures like the water buffalo. Colonel Packard's group runs into the bamboo spider. Bamboo spider kills a few of them, and then they take that down. So it's only in that one scene in the entire movie, and it's out for the rest of the time. And then from then on, the group of main characters run into the indigenous group of people on the island where John C. Reilly has been after he crashed there in World War II. So this is Tom Hiddleston and Brie Larson's group with John C. Reilly, and their main objective is to get off the island, where the other group with Colonel Packard is to kill Kong, get revenge. John C. Reilly says that's a bad idea because the guy they're looking for, who actually has already been dead, is where the Skullcrawlers live, and if you kill Kong, then the Skullcrawlers will come out and they'll take over because Kong is the only thing keeping them there. And once Kong is dead, then the oldest Skullcrawler, which is almost bigger than Kong, can come out. But that doesn't sway them. Samuel L. Jackson just wants to kill Kong and get revenge for his men. So they get to the helicopter and they they basically set a trap for Kong at the same time that Tom Hiddleston and Brie Larson make contact with Kong and kind of like have like an almost emotional moment with him and realize that he isn't trying to hurt them, he's just there being the guardian basically. So they want to try and save him from that point on, and John C. Reilly wants to tag along. And their mode of transportation is that there's actually a boat that John C. Reilly has been building since World War II with his friend who got killed by a Skullcrawler out of their ship or out of their planes that crashed. So they're kind of using that to get around. But Colonel Packard sets the trap for Kong and it works. Kong comes in and they end up burning an entire lake. They fill it with napalm that they had left over, and basically setting Kong on fire and really hurting him. And then Tom Hiddleston and Brie Larson end up being able to kind of like intervene and slow this process down. But in the time frame that happens, the big Skullcrawler ends up coming out of that lake, thus starting the confrontation between that Skullcrawler and Kong, which is short-lived because the Skullcrawler tries to chase down Tom Hiddleston and Brie Larson, and nearly at the same time, Kong ends up finishing off Colonel Packard and the rest of his platoon. Any of the survivors are with the group of the main protagonists at this point. So almost everyone's dead, including John Goodman. He got killed pretty early on by a Skullcrawler. The big Skullcrawler is chasing them, and at the same time, Kong is basically trying to save them. So he ends up showing up, and that's where we got all those teasers of the fight where Kong hits it with a rock and stuff like that and uses the tree. So that's kind of like the final battle between the two of them. And it's a pretty lengthy and good fight. Kong would not have been able to win without human intervention because he's not very tough. He got pretty messed up in the movie. But with the human intervention, like the Skullcrawler gets shot with a flare, and the plane ships shoot him, and kind of distract him and let Kong end up getting trapped in all these chains and stuff from an older ship. And by the time he finally gets out of there, and he uses one of the propellers from the ship as a weapon to fight the Skullcrawler off with, and eventually ends up killing it by ripping out its tongue, which I've seen somewhere before. So yeah, I don't remember what that's from, but I definitely remember that not being original. But it was cool. Whatever. Nothing big. Is that what happened in Pacific Rim with Otachi? I don't remember. It's beside the point. But that's the last of the Skullcrawlers as we know of, basically. So there's no more hostile creatures that I can remember being on the island. The big stick bug ends up being kind of friendly, but you know how that is. So that basically ends it. I mean, it shows that the group of survivors left. They're going away on the boat, and you can see the helicopters come over, and that's basically the end. We don't get to see them go home until after the credits, and that's when we get the interview of the survivors by the one surviving member of Monarch from that in the Monarch facility, telling them or talking to them about, you know, you didn't see any of that, whatever, and basically explaining that Kong's not the only king, and we see the cave painting of Godzilla, Mothra, and Rodan, and Ghidorah, and then a picture of Godzilla fighting Ghidorah, and then finally with Godzilla's roar, which is, you know, that is like the moment of hype that I had during the movie. Like the rest of the movie, it was a fun movie. It wasn't crazy. Didn't have my like undivided attention. Like it was a good movie, but it wasn't fantastic. the end credits scene, like intensity level alone, was what I was looking for in the entire movie. And I enjoyed it. It was a fun movie. Um, I wouldn't really call it like sad or anything like that, but according to my girlfriend, it was a tearjerker. So if you haven't seen it yet, be prepared to cry. I don't know, but it was a good movie. I'm gonna have to check up on how well it's doing, but I liked the way it was filmed a lot more than Godzilla 2014 was. We actually get to see the monsters, and there's like a good division between the human characters and the monster characters. The human characters actually had depth, personality, and were interesting. Insane. Nothing like Godzilla 2014, which is great, because all the characters in Godzilla 2014 were basically useless and had no interesting qualities, and they were the entire screen time, minus the Mutos, which that's a different discussion. But I mean, it's a good movie. It's a fun movie. You don't really have to be invested in the MonsterVerse to enjoy it. I'm not the biggest King Kong fan, but this is a good movie of King Kong. Probably the best current one. Way better than Peter Jackson's. Peter Jackson's was kind of like really boring at times. This one didn't lose like the level of interest, for me at least. There were some slow parts, but they made sense in the places that they were put, and there was some comedic relief. Obviously, that's probably why they cast John C. Reilly to be in here, which he did really good in the movie. It was perfect. His personality was exactly how you would expect somebody who had been on an island with people who didn't talk and giant monsters from World War II until the end of the Vietnam War. Like, he didn't even know the Vietnam War existed. He asked, "Did we win the war?" And they said, "Which one?" He said, "Oh, that makes sense." So he was really good. Tom Hiddleston did an awesome job playing the tracker in this movie. He was completely what his character needed to be: calm, cool, and collected, regardless of the situation. He was really good in the acting scenes. Brie Larson, she played obviously the Kong interest for like 2 seconds in the movie. Kong has to save her from drowning after he basically ends up knocking her in the water. So good one. But her character was definitely unique. She was an anti-war photographist, and she didn't have as much importance in the story as a lot of the other characters did, but she did have an impact, and her character was obviously prevalent. John Goodman wasn't as big of a role as I was expecting. He was almost like the Bryan Cranston of Godzilla 2014, but not to such a drastic degree. Like, he's in it for a little bit, but he gets killed super early on and doesn't really provide that whole lot to the story besides getting them to the island in the first place, because he knew that monsters existed. He knew that Godzilla existed, and he wanted to see what was here on this island, with his whole theory that the underground pocket still housed monsters, which is probably where Mothra, Rodan, and Ghidorah are currently hiding, or in other underground pockets, or under Skull Island in a different pocket. We don't really know. We'll find out in Godzilla 2, which is awesome. But the cast was just really good blend of different personalities and traits. Samuel L. Jackson did perfect as General Packard. He was aggressive, he was pissed off, he was mean, he hated everyone, he didn't care, all he wanted to do was kill Kong. That backfired, and he ended up getting killed by Kong, obviously. So everything went perfect with the cast, and overall, just the human characters didn't suck, which is awesome. Thank you, Kong Skull Island, for not being Godzilla 2014 with human roles. So that's really all I got for kind of just like a brief overview of the entire thing. If you guys went and saw it, let me know what you thought of the human characters, the way the monsters were, the fights, whatever you thought was cool or not good about the movie. Let me know what you thought so I can get some more input from people. Obviously, there's not a whole lot of people where I live that are kind of into this thing, so it's hard to talk to people about it. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. If you got time, hit the like button. It really helps out, especially with the YouTube algorithm. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace.